Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Super excited for this conversation, Rodrigo. I would like to start these off with just a brief introduction about yourself. If you can just let the group know kind of like what got you involved into the Ariba journey and where Ascend Elements is overall, that'd be great.
All right. Well, Kevin, thanks for the invite. Always a pleasure to talk to you guys. Uh, so I am the supply chain director here at Ascend Elements, and probably throughout this conversation, we're going to touch a few things, right, on why we did what we did and where are we. And for that, it's important to share first who we are, right? What is Ascend Elements? Maybe some people know about us, some people might not. So let me start sharing that. So Ascend Elements, we are a young company. You can say we're a startup, a company in the EV battery space. So we're based in Massachusetts. We're headquartered there. We have a pilot plant in Massachusetts. We have a site in Georgia, which is a decent sized site for recycling of EV battery. We are in the process of building this massive site in Kentucky that will deliver an engineered material that goes back into an EV battery. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And then we also have a lab in Michigan. So we started a few years ago as a company. And overall, what we do is we start our process getting an end of life EV battery or a manufacturing scrap EV battery, meaning that a battery that was not approved in their quality process. We get this EV battery, we bring it to Georgia, we shred the battery, and that you can say is the recycling part of the business. And we use that shredded battery, and that generates like a thin black powder that is very rich in metals. And what we do is we get that metal, we'll send it to Kentucky as a feedstock, and Kentucky will build the engineering material, and that will go back into a brand new EV battery. So this way we close the loop on the sustainability of the EV battery. There's a lot of advantages to that, right? You reduce dependency in other countries, you mine way less metals because, well, you can call this urban mining, right? Because we're avoiding batteries to go to the landfill and just getting it and go back to the brand new EV battery. So that's what we do, and that's we're in the process of building. Okay. The context for us and the Ariba journey is probably very different than the context for a company that is running already for, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 100 years of operation that is more in the run the business mode than we are. We will very soon be in the run the business mode. We did all this and we started in this journey to make sure that we are well positioned to become a company operating in Kentucky. We'll continue with the site in Georgia because that's an important, very important source of feedstock. But that's what got us in the journey, right? Make sure that we're doing this the right way since the beginning. So I'm the supply chain director here at Ascend, and in supply chain here at Ascend, I'm responsible for both the supply chain and sourcing. Now, because of our moment, the majority of my time is dedicated to sourcing. Over time, that balance will probably shift a bit. But yeah, majority of my time today was as a sourcing director, and not like supply chain overall. It'll
Perfect.
probably shift over time.
That's perfect, Rodrigo. Thank you very much for that intro. And once again, really appreciate you being here. I know we've chatted in the past, and as you know, I'm super passionate about the overall transition probably over the next 10, 15, 20 years in the US economy, certainly to a more sustainable one. My understanding is when we were chatting earlier, you were mentioning how the reality of your business, frankly, was that it was growing faster than your infrastructure could support. And you really started looking at some of the key applications to support your journey across the board, whether that was SAP S4 or Ariba, etc. From a platform perspective, just what are your thoughts around that infrastructure and really how you guys are going to be using it to continue to support your rapid growth?
it's a journey, right? And I don't even know if the journey ever ends. Maybe just shifts direction over time, but I don't think it ever ends. Uh, we started enhancing our operation related tools in like a year, a little bit more than that. We went through a lot of internal discussion on what are the tools that we need, what is the right timing that we need, what are the priorities for us, and we did decide to go with SAP S4 Cloud, and we also did Ariba. We did all of the assessment, and the decision to go with this combination of tools kind of happened in the same timing. But I would think that a more traditional operation, you would have your ERP platform running, right? And then you built things on top, right? All those other functionalities, and I see sourcing as one of them. In our case, we did the opposite. We did decide, and it was important to make that a combined decision, right? Because if you're going with one platform, okay, what is the best solution that better connects and talks to that platform? So we decided at the same time. But again, remember that we're in the process of building this massive site in Kentucky. It's a $1 billion investment going on, and so we had a lot of focus on sourcing. So we started first with the implementation of Ariba, and Ariba went live before SAP did. Now, since then, there was an effort in SAP. It was already implemented. We have SAP running in our site in Georgia. For some functionalities, it's okay, company-wide. Purchasing is one of them. But for like site itself, yeah, it's running in Georgia. Went live earlier this year. Ariba went live almost exactly a year ago, and in June of last year, we went live with Ariba. So the strategy was okay, if we want to focus on sourcing, we need to do it right, and we need to go with the sourcing solution first, because that was just more of a pressing need at the time. From the cases that I've seen, it's usually the opposite, right? So I think it was a little bit different, but Kevin, you've seen more of these than I have, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, of course, typically an organization will have its ERP running up and going. I mean, just given new market, relatively fresh company, and everything else, not surprising that Ascend ended up taking a slightly different journey, or just kind of how we would layer in a traditional implementation. But at the end of the day, right, you get to the point where you need to. You define the outcomes you're trying to achieve up front. And from there, just make sure that you're tracking towards those. You know, during the deployment, I know that you actually pushed us as your system integrator to really kind of challenge our traditional approaches for deployments. Anything you'd like to add or expand on regarding some of that digital transformation, getting sourcing stood up? And just kind of the approach, I guess, to implementation that was required, frankly, for your environment.
Yeah, so the implementation was super interesting, right? On how we did this. So we signed the contract. We had the whole time just make sure that Ariba as a tool was available to be customized to a certain point, right? More configured than customized, probably. And then we had some of our team members, very experienced professionals, because we are a young company, but we have a lot of experienced professionals in the company. So we had some of our team members. It was really not that many people. And then we had a few people very knowledgeable from Primicati. We met. We had a 2-3 days meeting. The process to configure started the moment we started the meeting. When we left those 2 days events, Ariba was completely configured. Work is done. All the workflows determined. There was nothing else to be implemented. Now, okay, there was some teaching and learning and practicing and becoming familiar with the tool. But I think you can say that the whole design process, which usually takes a long time, really happened in 2-3 days. And if we want to do this fast, yeah, we cannot take like months to go through this design. So it actually worked well for us. And for some module, for the contracts module, it was, I mean, from that point on, that was the way of getting contracts routed, approved, stored, official repository, etc. I remember a few months after, not many months after, well, we don't even have 12 months after, right? So a few months after the implementation, I was looking at some reporting to see how many contracts we have there. And we were already in like hundreds of documents stored. Wow. So I guess that validates that it worked.
Well, it's definitely being used. Listen, I know that we have really been challenging a lot of the assumptions, frankly, that are made when you look at a deployment, right? And just for the audience, when we think about what a general deployment takes for sourcing, you're usually looking at about 3 months, about 12 weeks, plus or minus a little bit, and then a couple of weeks of post-go live support. So, really going in and what I would say laying out a best practice scenario with with a great team, obviously on the customer side as well, and then saying, okay, how does this fit into the organization? Allowed something which frankly hasn't been done before in terms of the speed to business, speed to full configuration, which was just excellent. One of the things that I'm always curious about, obviously Ascend is very much in the sustainable energy, renewable energy, sustainability, et cetera, with the recycling. And I understand that with your technology, you're able to get, I want to say, up to about 98% fully recyclability out of the battery extraction process, which is really excellent. As you look at the sourcing tool, are there any, kind of from a data standpoint, are there any specific measures that you or your team is looking at implementing to continue to improve efficiency and drive towards additional cost savings overall in your procurement operations specifically?
Yeah, sustainability is a lot of the reason why we exist. Right. I just explained in the beginning, right, the whole logic of the company and what is it that will deliver, not only what, but mainly the how, because this is really the secret sauce is the how, exactly. not the what. So sustainability is foundational for this company, right? Having that said, the whole operations and sourcing and everything, everybody needs to speak the same language, right? And we need to be sustainable for the environment. We also need to be sustainable as a company, right? And very productive and effective. And these tools will always help us be better and be more efficient. As I said, a lot of my time is dedicated to sourcing today, right? Because of all that we're buying. And these tools allow us to map the market and capture good market intel and good data better than if you're just doing it without any technology to support you. So we use a lot the tool. Sometimes it's for RFI purposes and understanding, okay, does your company have sustainability goals and things like that. And all of those inputs, they influence the decision-making process. Because again, we need to do this from start to finish. And so every tool or initiative that helps us make sure that we are awarding the right companies that have the same type of priorities that we do, they play a role, right? And in terms of productivity, in some cases, so we did all the implementation, but I'll say implementation is one thing, adoption is a different thing, right? We have seen that adoption in some of the markets are more advanced than others. So we did, one of the recent RFPs that we did was for instrumentation for the site. Huge success, right? uh, quite a few companies engaged. All the prices captured. There was a decent amount of items that we were looking for. I mean, it was not like thousands, but a decent quantity, and all that worked very well. And that saved us a lot of time and sharing data, compiling data, and doing the analysis. So that was very very helpful. And because of things like that, it allowed us to focus on other activities just because it saves time in the whole analysis process. Having that said, for other events, we use more for RFI purposes than the RFP itself.
Right.
Okay. But it still has its value, right? Because then, okay, it's a database that we're creating for the future, right? For our future.
As we kind of talk through this, is there any way that that you specifically or Ascend more broadly is really trying to leverage, what I would say, data analytics, et cetera, in terms of driving some of the decision making for your sourcing processes, right? I mean, obviously, we just talked a little bit about focusing on efficiency, cost savings, integrating that in to the overall vision, right, of long-term sustainability. But from a data standpoint, is there anything you could share from that standpoint that either Ariba is supporting or just more broadly the Ascend team is leveraging to support your decision making?
We're a very data driven organization, right? Vast majority of the companies are engineers at this point, right? And sometimes we even see ourselves, we were talking about something and we make a statement. Okay, do we have data to support the statement that we just did? Because if we don't have data to support the statement, then we need to go back to the drawing board and back to the exercises to make sure that whatever theory or scenario we're talking about is backed up by good data, right? And when we go to sourcing, a lot of that data, that's where we should be capturing it and having it organized, because data is great, it's fundamental and all that, but it's easier said than done to have it organized in a very compliant way that supports the decision. And supports the decision is not only price, capability, lead time, but there are a bunch of additional requirements that you need to have that database set up. So Ascend is, we were honored to receive federal grants from the Department of Energy back in 2022, and that money was granted for the construction of our Kentucky facility, which was a big effort for the government, right, to try to incentivize this market in the U.S. so we can depend less on foreign countries. And so it's great to get that funds, but it does come with a lot of requirements, right? So compliance is a big thing. So in many cases, we need to source and we need to document how it's sourced and keep all the data to, when audited or as audited, we make sure that, okay, yeah, we have all these requirements that we need to follow, and this is the evidence that we did follow, and that's also super valuable data that influences our decision.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. I know the whole data element and how that's integrated into basically the decision making process, I think, is critical. In terms of the kind of your future, right, as we start to continue to go forward. So currently, obviously, you've got your base ERP solution stood up, SAP S4. I know you're live with Ariba sourcing as well as contracts. What's kind of your next stages or the next priorities from a roadmap perspective, and really in terms of figuring out how you continue to enhance your overall supply chain and procurement processes?
We still have a long road ahead. we recently started, right? As I mentioned. Having that said, if you asked me this question 5 years from now, I'll probably say the same thing. We still have a long road ahead,
Of
right?
course, of
Because
course.
because this never ends. Uh, so we did this implementation. We still have more to do to capture the full benefit of Ariba that we're not capturing today, and we will eventually, probably soon. Uh, but it wasn't just a priority at the time. So we're very focused. What we need to do now is make sure that we have all of our operation running and running well. And that means we're going to start the Kentucky site at the end of the year for commissioning. We'll be ready for industrial scale next year. The Covington site is feeding our operation, and that's all running well. So the priority will probably advance more and get more out of the tools that we already have, and because there's still more opportunity there,
Right.
and we'll probably shift over time a little bit more because today we're a heavy like capex minded organization. We'll start shifting to a more opex minded organization, and with that different tools will come because we need to run that operation in a very lean and effective way. It's going to be a big site, right? So the material that will come out of that site will be enough to to feed 750,000 EVs per year. So it's a big number, right? And it's a big operation. So all of our technology roadmap on the operation side of it, I'm not talking about the R&D and the process development because that's a huge thing by itself. But from an operations part of it, we'll start at some point migrating more to making sure that our not only we're buying it the right way, but we're running it the right way as well.
It's in terms of just a journey, right? I mean, that I think that is one of the critical pieces. Having been in the procurement space really since around 1998, and the first 15 years of that focused on deployments, I can't tell you the number of times where you would wrap up a deployment in the very beginning, early days of really the Ariba journey, frankly. And then as you start the next one, you're like, oh, if only I would have known then what I know now, continue to go forward. So I think the thing that I really enjoy the most about our conversations, Rodrigo, is that number one, you and Ascend or Ascend and yourself really took the approach of how do we accelerate what I would call the time to value, or the ability to get both your technology stack stood up, implemented, and utilized, right? The fact that you had over 100 contracts within months of having the system configured, that's fantastic. And really, it is just an incremental process. One of the challenges I think a lot of organizations encounter, which is not something, frankly, I think that Ascend is going to have to worry about. But the challenge is always, how are we going to proceduralize the continued change and growth? Whether it's, I think, the nature of your business, or just kind of where you are in the journey. I think it's fantastic that it's, your answer of, well, we've got it stood up, we've made progress, and I'm sure if you ask me this 5 years from now, I'll probably say the exact same thing. As you look back briefly on kind of where you've been over the past year or so since going live with the technology, or even as Ascend more broadly, are there any lessons learned that you would share just in general for any other companies that are interested in making some sort of a transformation in the procurement space?
I am very happy with the decision we made on what is our priority. What is it that we want out of this now, and what we want out of this later? What we do need now and what we don't need now. So we dedicated a lot of time to strategize all this, and I think it proved to be the right strategy. So I guess that the time dedicated in advance to understand what is the implementation plan that actually meet what we need.
Right.
Even if we might want something else, what is it that we need versus what we want? So the a good amount of time in a good team behind and a good team working with you also to come up with this plan was the critical thing. It was very tempting, and we talked about, okay, let's do, and then we list a bunch of things, and then, okay, no, it's not for us right now. Let's focus on what we need and leave these for the future. And I guess that was the main thing for us in the implementation. Now we can always look back and say, yeah, we could do something different, but
Right.
But that's not fear with the past, right? Because we didn't know at the past what we know now. But in general, it was the right thing and the right amount of time dedicated to think about this.
Yeah, no, I listen, I think again, one of the most critical things there is the Ascend team, yourself certainly had a very clear idea around what are we trying to achieve and what are the features, functions, etc., that are going to allow us to achieve it. To your point, it's almost it can be a fool's errand, frankly, to say we are going to deploy every single bell and whistle that a particular software package allows for. But really defining upfront, taking the time upfront to thoroughly say, this is what we're trying to achieve. These are the features which will support that. And these are going to be future roadmap items that we can continue to grow into as we gain more experience inside of the system. I think that's absolutely critical. So I know we're just about at the end of our time. Rodrigo, I want to once again thank you very, very much for joining us today. To those attendees, thank you very much as well for spending a couple of minutes with us at your lunchtime. And I've got to put in a shameless plug, of course, at the end of all of this. So our next webinar will be on June 27th, and that one's going to be focusing on really trying to revolutionize accounts payable with automation across the board, and what some of the art of the possible is going to be there as well. So with that, thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and I look forward to speaking with you in about a month. Thanks again, Rodrigo.
Thanks, Kevin. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.